ever thought Earth would be exiled from the stars. Humanity had struggled, dreamed, and fought for centuries just to reach the point where they could finally stand among the great civilizations of the galaxy. When they joined the Galactic Council, it felt like history itself had turned a page. For a while, things looked promising. Humans learned from alien scholars, traded with distant worlds, and shared their music, art, and ideas across the stars. The galaxy seemed endless, full of hope. But then came the day everything changed. It started with a single mistake, or at least that's what the official record said. A trade summit had been organized on a neutral station, orbiting a small star near the edge of Council space. Earth had sent its representatives, proud and cautious, knowing that even one wrong word could cost them dearly. The Council species, tall, graceful beings of light, energy, and strange forms, looked down on humans with thinly veiled mistrust. To them, Earth's people were unpredictable, emotional, and dangerous. The meeting went smoothly at first. Talks about resource sharing and defense agreements filled the air, but then a small argument broke out. Something about mining rights in a disputed sector. Voices rose. A translation glitch distorted a phrase. And in the chaos that followed, a Council cruiser, one of their proudest ships, exploded in orbit. No one knew exactly what happened. Some said it was sabotage, others claimed it was human error, but it didn't matter. The Council didn't care who was truly at fault. They just needed someone to blame. Within hours, Earth was called before the Council. The grand chamber shimmered with light as thousands of alien representatives turned toward the small human delegation standing at the center. A voice echoed through the hall. Cold, mechanical, merciless. Humanity has violated the sanctity of peace. The destruction of a Council vessel cannot go unanswered. Effective immediately, Earth and its colonies are stripped of membership. You are hereby exiled from the Galactic Council. The words hit like thunder. Humanity, the youngest, most fragile member of the galactic community, was thrown out. No trade, no protection, no access to the wormhole network that connected the stars. Every door closed at once. The Council broadcast the decision across every world, every system, every colony. Billions of aliens watched as Earth's image was removed from the Council banner. The message was clear. Humans are dangerous. They don't belong among us. On Earth, people gathered in silence as the transmission played on every screen. Some wept, some shouted. Others simply stared into the sky, wondering how everything had fallen apart so fast. In the cities, factories that once produced goods for galactic trade shut down overnight. Ships returning from foreign ports were denied entry. Cargo fleets vanished. The world that had once been full of promise was suddenly alone again. But isolation didn't break them. It hardened them. At first, there was chaos. Nations blamed each other. Riots spread. Governments argued over who was responsible for the exile. But slowly, the anger began to fade, replaced by something else: determination. Humanity had always faced impossible odds. They had survived world wars, disasters, and dark ages. This was just another test, only bigger. Scientists began working day and night, trying to find new ways to replace the alien technology they had once depended on. Engineers tore apart old Council devices to understand how they worked. Farmers learned to rebuild the land using their own methods. Space agencies pooled their remaining resources to keep the colonies alive. In orbit, the last of Earth's starships drifted silently. Their crews stared out into the endless blackness, wondering what lay ahead. They knew the Council had expected humanity to fade away, cut off from the galaxy's lifelines. But deep down, they refused to accept that fate. In the quiet corners of the planet, people began to whisper about rebuilding, not just surviving, but returning stronger. A single phrase started spreading, spoken in meetings, factories, and classrooms. They turned us away. We'll make our own place among the stars. Years passed. Children grew up never knowing the galaxy that once embraced them. To them, the Council was nothing but a story, a warning about arrogance and fear. Earth rebuilt in silence, hidden from the galactic gaze. Still, the memory of exile burned like a wound. Every scientist who stayed up late in a lab, every pilot who tested new engines, every miner who risked their life digging for fuel, they all carried the same thought. We will not be forgotten. Meanwhile, across the stars, the other civilizations barely remembered Earth. To them, humanity was a minor mistake in a long history of great empires. The Council moved on, content in their illusion of control. They didn't know that the humans they had exiled were already preparing for something no one had imagined: independence. The real turning point came when an old research outpost on Luna sent a simple message back to Earth: we can build it ourselves. No one knew exactly what it was, but the words spread like wildfire. Factories reopened, engineers came out of retirement. Private companies merged with government programs. Every person, no matter how small their skill, found a role in this quiet, unstoppable movement. The Council thought they had silenced Earth forever. Instead, they had awakened something fierce. In the ruins of abandoned trade hubs, humans stripped down alien machines and rebuilt them from scratch. They learned to design warp drives that didn't rely on Council crystals. They experimented with gravity engines, energy weapons, and shield, systems that worked on principles no alien had considered before. And slowly, in secret, ships began to rise again. Not sleek or beautiful, but strong, practical, and built to last. Out in deep space, far from the Council's eyes, the first human fleets gathered. Their hulls bore no banners, no symbols, only scars of hard work and defiance. They were not there to start a war. They were there to survive. On Earth, people would sometimes look up at the night sky and spot faint glimmers moving across the stars, the new ships, leaving their home behind. And each time, someone would whisper, "We're coming back." Humanity had been thrown out of the galaxy, humiliated in front of 1,000 worlds. But instead of dying in the dark, they had turned inward, building their strength from the ashes. The Council's decision had been final, or so they thought. But far from their polished halls and perfect worlds, a new power was quietly taking shape. An empire not of arrogance or conquest, but of endurance and will. And it all began the day Earth was exiled. They called it punishment. Humanity would remember it as the beginning. The years after Earth's exile were the hardest in human history. When the Council cut them off, it wasn't just a political decision. It was survival being ripped away. The wormhole gates that once connected Earth to hundreds of colonies went dark. Supplies stopped coming. Communication links were severed. The galaxy that once looked bright and full of promise suddenly turned its back, leaving humanity alone in the endless dark. In the first months, panic spread like wildfire. Entire industries that depended on alien trade collapsed overnight. Food shortages hit hard. Factories shut down. Cargo ships filled with stranded workers drifted helplessly without safe routes to return. Governments tried to calm the people, promising it was temporary, that the Council would reconsider. But everyone knew the truth. The galaxy had already forgotten them. On the colonies, the situation was even worse. Worlds that had relied on Council trade to survive began to fail. Some outposts went silent forever. Others sent desperate distress calls that never reached home. Families on Earth watched the skies, wondering if their loved ones out there were still alive. The Council believed that isolation would break humanity, that without galactic support, Earth would collapse within a decade. But they didn't understand what humans were made of. They didn't understand the stubbornness that had carried them through wars, disasters, and centuries of struggle. They didn't know that when the door to the stars closed, humans would start building their own door. The first step was survival. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock to restore old systems. Every nation pooled its knowledge and resources. It didn't matter who ruled before. For the first time in history, humanity had one goal. They had no allies in the galaxy, so they became their own allies. People adapted quickly. Farms expanded into deserts using recycled water. Solar grids spread across the planet to replace the energy that once came from alien reactors. Engineers studied every piece of technology the Council had left behind. Engines, weapons, shields, and began to rebuild them from the ground up. They didn't copy. They reinvented. The world changed in strange ways. Streets once filled with advertisements for alien products now carried banners with bold words: made by humanity. Children grew up learning not just math and history, but how to build things, how to fix machines, how to survive in a galaxy that didn't want them. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about never needing anyone again. Still, life wasn't easy. Spaceports became graveyards of unused ships. The colonies sent fewer and fewer messages each year. People on Earth went hungry. But through the hardship came unity. Neighbors helped each other. Scientists shared discoveries openly. Even rival companies began working together. There was no competition now, only the will to endure. Then something unexpected happened. A group of engineers in one of Earth's underground labs made a discovery while trying to repair an old Council drive core. They realized that humans had been using only a fraction of what their own materials could do. The Council had always told them that human-built components couldn't handle faster than light travel safely. But that was a lie. With some adjustments, the humans managed to stabilize the core far beyond the old limits. The test ship that used it was small and rough, but it worked. It flew farther than any Earth ship had gone since the Exile. That moment changed everything. The message spread across the world. We can do it ourselves. Factories reopened. Abandoned research centers lit up again. Pilots who had once given up on flying volunteered to test new engines. In a world once full of despair, a spark had returned. But it wasn't just technology that evolved. People changed too. They became tougher, more practical. The comfort and luxury that came from alien trade faded, replaced by hard work and self-reliance. Humanity learned to build with what they had. They learned that progress didn't come from others' approval, but from their own hands. The colonies that survived began following Earth's example. They stopped waiting for rescue and started creating their own industries. Some built underground cities to survive harsh conditions. Others turned entire moons into energy farms. Slowly, the pieces of the old human network came back online, not through council gates, but through human-made routes. Years passed. The younger generation barely remembered what life was like before the Exile. They didn't grow up fearing the council. They didn't even care about the judgment that had cast their ancestors aside. To them, the stars were not forbidden. They were waiting. A quiet determination filled every level of society. Scientists worked through the night, driven not by money or fame, but by the idea that someday humanity would return to the stars stronger than before. Artists painted scenes of distant worlds with Earth's ships flying proudly above them. Teachers told children that the galaxy didn't own them, it only challenged them. One day, deep in a mountain research base, a small group of engineers succeeded in building something the Council said was impossible. A warp engine powered entirely by human technology. No alien crystals, no borrowed designs, just raw ingenuity. It was unstable, risky, and full of flaws, but it worked. For the first time since the Exile, Earth had a way to travel freely again. When the first test flight succeeded, the crew didn't cheer loudly or broadcast it across the stars. They just looked out at the blackness of space, feeling something they hadn't felt in generations: freedom. Back on Earth, news of the success spread quietly at first, then like wildfire. People crowded around screens, listening to the transmission from orbit. A simple voice said, "Human drive successful. Earth can fly again." It wasn't just a technical achievement, it was a symbol of survival. Humanity had been cut off, abandoned, and left to die in the dark, but they had refused to stop trying. That stubborn spark, the one that had always defined them, was burning brighter than ever. Over the next decade, the isolation that once felt like a punishment became a source of strength. The world that once begged for help now stood on its own feet. The Exile had taught humanity something the Council never intended them to learn: independence. Out beyond the solar system, new ships began exploring again. They carried no Council markings, no foreign insignia, only one symbol, a simple circle representing Earth surrounded by stars. Every time a ship left orbit, people on the ground would watch it fade into the sky. They didn't know if it would return, but they felt proud. Each one was a step toward something bigger, something the Council couldn't stop. The galaxy had wanted to erase humanity from history. Instead, it had given them time to grow without interference. The isolation years, though filled with hardship and loss, became the foundation of everything that followed. People stopped talking about revenge or acceptance. They started talking about destiny. The Council's rejection had given humanity a new purpose. to build their own place in the universe. No one could have guessed it then, but the seeds planted in those quiet, lonely years would one day grow into something vast. Empires rise and fall in the galaxy, but this one, this human-made empire, would be different. It would be built not from arrogance, but from endurance, sacrifice, and unity. In the darkness of exile, humanity had discovered their greatest strength, themselves. And the stars that once turned away would soon see that the people of Earth didn't fade away. They adapted, they endured, and they waited, because deep down, they knew one day their ships would return to the galactic stage, not as outcasts, but as equals. The isolation didn't destroy them. It transformed them, and somewhere far beyond the reach of the Council, a new future was quietly being born. Decades passed since Earth's exile, and what began as struggle slowly turned into strength. The generation that had seen the Council's judgment grew old, but their children grew up differently. They were born into a world that no longer looked to the stars for approval. Instead, they looked at the stars as a challenge, something waiting to be claimed. Humanity had been forced to stand alone, but in that loneliness they found clarity. Old governments were replaced by something new, a united structure built on necessity, not politics. It wasn't about nations anymore. It was about survival, growth, and destiny. The people of Earth and the scattered colonies agreed on one thing. Humanity needed one voice, one vision, and one command. That was how the Terran Dominion began, not as an empire of conquest, but as a family of survivors who refused to vanish. The early days of the Dominion were chaotic. Every colony had its own problems. Some lacked water, some struggled with radiation, others fought to breathe in thin atmospheres. Supplies were short, but hope was not. Earth became the heart of coordination, sending out ships filled with tools, food, and knowledge. In return, the colonies sent resources and raw materials. Slowly, trade routes began to form, not the grand hyperlanes of the Council, but rough, dangerous paths that humans carved themselves. Every successful voyage was a victory. Every new colony that survived another winter was proof that humanity could endure anything. Engineers worked tirelessly to improve their ships, building better engines, stronger hulls, and faster communication systems. Pilots flew through storms of radiation and debris to keep the connection between worlds alive. There were no heroes, no grand leaders standing above others, only people doing their part. In labs, scientists built machines to make barren soil fertile. In mines, workers dug deep into alien rock for minerals to fuel the next generation of ships. On distant outposts, settlers looked up at strange skies and whispered the same words every human knew by heart. We survived together. As the Dominion grew, so did its technology. Human engineers had learned from their exile. They didn't try to copy the Council anymore. Instead, they invented in their own way, using what they understood best. They mixed old-world science with creativity, creating machines that no alien mind would ever design. Their ships weren't elegant like the Council's shining cruisers, but they were durable, adaptable, and fast. One of the biggest breakthroughs came from a research team working in orbit around Mars. They discovered a way to harness energy directly from solar radiation, converting it into pure power that could sustain entire fleets. This invention changed everything. Suddenly, the Dominion didn't need to rely on rare crystals or alien fuel. Their ships could travel farther and longer than ever before. Soon, the first true fleet of the Terran Dominion was born. They called it the Vanguard Line. It wasn't built for war. It was built to explore, to reconnect the forgotten human colonies, and to show that Earth was no longer alone. The day the fleet launched, people across the planet stopped to watch. From cities, deserts, and oceans, they looked up as massive vessels rose slowly through the clouds, glowing in the morning sun. It wasn't just metal leaving the ground. It was history taking flight. Each ship carried a piece of Earth within it, a flag, a handful of soil, a song recorded by schoolchildren. It was a reminder that no matter how far they went, humanity would always carry its home with them. As the ships disappeared into the blackness, something changed in the hearts of the people. For the first time since the exile, they didn't feel small anymore. They didn't feel like outcasts. They felt like builders of something new, something bigger than any one world. The Dominion began sending missions beyond the solar system. Some found long-lost human settlements struggling to survive. Others discovered planets rich with life but untouched by civilization. Each discovery was met not with greed but gratitude. Instead of claiming worlds through force, they helped the settlers build, sharing technology and supplies freely. Soon, hundreds of worlds were part of the Dominion. Not all were human. Some alien refugees cast out by the Council's strict laws found sanctuary under Earth's new flag. These outsiders expected to be treated with suspicion, but instead they were welcomed. The humans didn't forget what exile felt like. They understood what it meant to be unwanted. And so the Dominion became a home for all those who had nowhere else to go. The Council, however, began to notice. At first they ignored the reports, stories of human ships moving through unregulated systems, rumors of colonies thriving in zones long abandoned. But when the first trade network between Dominion worlds was detected, the Council grew uneasy. Humanity was supposed to fade into history, not rise again stronger than before. But the Dominion didn't care. They weren't looking for the Council's approval. They were too busy growing, building, exploring. In just one generation, they had achieved what the galaxy said was impossible: self-sufficiency. Inside the Dominion, education became a priority. Every child learned about the exile, not as a tragedy, but as a lesson. They were taught that strength came from unity, that curiosity was a gift, and that freedom was worth the price. People didn't grow up dreaming of joining alien academies anymore. They dreamed of leading expeditions, of finding new worlds, of proving that humanity could thrive without permission. As the Dominion expanded, so did its culture. Art, music, and literature flourished again. Painters captured the glow of twin suns on alien oceans. Musicians blended human sounds with the rhythms of other species who had joined them. It was as if all the colors of the galaxy had found a new home under one banner. Of course, not everything was perfect. There were disagreements, colonies that wanted more autonomy, trade disputes, and moments of tension. But the Dominion's leaders knew something the Council had forgotten. Unity didn't mean control. It meant cooperation. When problems arose, they listened. They found balance, and that made them stronger. By the end of the first century after exile, the Terran Dominion stretched across hundreds of star systems. Its fleets were vast, its people proud, and its ideals unshakable. What started as a desperate attempt to survive had become an empire, not of fear but of resilience. Yet deep down, people still remembered the day they were cast out. They remembered the humiliation, the way the galaxy had turned its back. That memory didn't bring anger anymore, it brought focus. Humanity didn't want revenge. They wanted to build a better way, to prove that compassion and courage could create something greater than arrogance ever could. One night, on a world far from Earth, a group of settlers stood under 3 moons, watching a ship descend from the sky. The words Terran Dominion were painted boldly across its side. As the ramp lowered, the settlers cheered. Help had come. They weren't forgotten. That moment captured what the Dominion truly meant: hope arriving from the stars. From that point on, humanity's legend spread quietly across the galaxy. Traders whispered about the human fleets that never failed to return. Scientists from distant species spoke of the strange creative technology humans used, things that shouldn't work, but always did. And refugees told stories of how the humans took them in when no one else would. The Council tried to ignore it, but deep down, they knew. The exiled species had become something extraordinary. The very world they had once dismissed as a primitive backwater had turned into a rising power. And back on Earth, standing under the endless night sky, people no longer asked if they would ever rejoin the galaxy. They asked a different question now. What will we build next? The answer was already in motion. The Dominion was not just surviving. It was expanding, evolving, and preparing for the day when it would no longer need to hide in the shadows. Humanity had built an empire out of nothing but determination. They didn't conquer planets. They conquered doubt. And in the quiet hum of their ships as they crossed the vast reaches of space, one thought united them all. The Council had exiled them, but in doing so, they had set them free. The Terran Dominion was born not from pride or vengeance, but from a single, unbreakable truth. No one decides humanity's place in the stars but humanity itself. At first, the galaxy didn't notice the rise of the Terran Dominion. Humanity was far from the bright centers of galactic civilization. hidden among uncharted systems and forgotten sectors. The Council still saw Earth as an isolated world, struggling in the dark. To them, humanity was a closed chapter, a warning, not a threat. But the galaxy was about to learn how wrong it was. The first signs came quietly. Traders from independent worlds began reporting strange ships appearing in deep space, ships built from unfamiliar materials, with engines that glowed brighter than standard Council drives. They didn't match any known design. These vessels didn't attack or communicate. They simply passed through, silent and purposeful, charting routes across forgotten regions. Most traders dismissed them as rumors, but the few who saw them up close noticed one detail: the human insignia, carved boldly into their hulls. It wasn't long before the whispers reached the Council. The humans, it seemed, had not vanished after all, but the Council dismissed the reports again. Impossible, they said. Their technology was too primitive. Their colonies couldn't have survived. Yet the evidence kept growing. Remote satellites captured blurred images of massive fleets operating in dead zones. Mining companies complained that their outposts were being bought or rebuilt under mysterious new ownership. Behind closed doors, Council leaders began to worry. Humanity had been exiled over a century ago, but somehow they had built something powerful enough to reach across dozens of systems. Still, no one knew how far it went, or how strong it truly was. Meanwhile, in the quiet corners of space, the Terran Dominion continued to expand. They had learned from their years of isolation never to announce their achievements until they were undeniable. Their ships operated efficiently and quietly, mapping resource fields, stabilizing new colonies, and spreading a communication network that didn't rely on Council technology. The Dominion didn't use the Council's wormholes anymore. They had built something better, small human-made jump corridors powered by new engines that folded space itself. It was dangerous at first. Early experiments had gone wrong, leaving ships stranded or torn apart by unstable gravity waves. But humans didn't stop. They kept refining the design, failure after failure, until it worked perfectly. Now their fleets could travel across the stars faster than anyone believed possible. The galaxy started to notice when the Dominion began helping other worlds. In one border system, a mining colony belonging to a neutral species suffered a catastrophic reactor failure. The Council ignored their distress call. Too far, too costly, not worth the effort. But hours later, a fleet of Dominion ships appeared out of the dark, stabilized the reactor, and provided medical aid. When asked why they helped, the human commander simply said, "Because no one else did." Then they left without asking for payment. That act spread through the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time, alien species began speaking of humans with respect instead of fear. Stories grew of the Dominion's generosity, of their ships that appeared out of nowhere, helped the helpless, and disappeared just as quickly. Some called them guardians, others called them ghosts. But one thing was certain: they were back. The Council couldn't ignore it any longer. Their analysts began tracking Dominion movements, trying to estimate their power. What they found terrified them. Human-controlled space had grown vast, covering hundreds of systems. Their technology, once centuries behind, now rivaled the Council's finest fleets. And worst of all, they had accomplished it entirely alone. The Council sent emissaries to open communication again, but their messages received no response. The Dominion remained silent, neither friendly nor hostile. They didn't seek revenge, but they also didn't bow to old authority. To the Council, this silence was more unsettling than open aggression. It meant humanity no longer cared what the Council thought. Within the Dominion, life thrived. Entire planets that had once been barren were now covered in cities and gardens. Human architecture blended with alien designs from species who had joined them. It wasn't an empire of control. It was an alliance built on trust and shared survival. Refugees from across the galaxy came to Dominion space, seeking protection, education, and a fresh start. And they found it. What made the Dominion truly unique wasn't its ships or its weapons. It was its people. The humans had built a culture that valued action over talk, courage over fear, and unity over pride. They remembered how it felt to be abandoned, and they refused to let others experience the same. One of the most surprising things for the galaxy was the Dominion's new cities. Vast, orbital habitats built around suns, powered entirely by human-made technology. From a distance, they glowed like golden rings in the dark. Travelers who visited them spoke of harmony. No elite ruling class, no fear of punishment, only cooperation. It was as if exile had taught humanity how to build a better version of civilization itself. But the Council couldn't help feeling threatened. For centuries, they had ruled the galaxy through control and tradition. Every new species that joined the Council was forced to adapt to their rules. The Dominion broke that pattern completely. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't follow galactic laws. Yet their empire ran more efficiently than any Council state. So the Council did what they always did when they didn't understand something. They sent spies. Disguised ships entered Dominion space under the pretense of trade. They gathered data, studying the humans closely. What they saw shocked them. Dominion factories operated without waste, powered by systems that recycled almost everything. Their fleets were coordinated by artificial intelligences far beyond anything the Council had ever approved. And their scientists had unlocked a level of energy control once thought impossible. Still, the most unsettling discovery wasn't the technology. It was the people. Dominion citizens were fiercely loyal, not because of fear, but because of belief. They genuinely trusted their leaders, their system, and their mission. They didn't see themselves as an empire. They saw themselves as family, one species united with others under a single goal: to ensure no one would ever be exiled again. When the Council received the first full report, silence filled the chamber. For the first time in centuries, they realized the balance of power had shifted. The humans they had once considered primitive had surpassed them. Some Council members suggested reaching out again, this time with respect. Others warned against it, fearing that any contact could reveal weakness. But before they could decide, something unexpected happened. The Dominion sent a transmission. It wasn't a declaration of war. It wasn't a request to rejoin. It was a simple message broadcast across all major channels. A human voice said, "We are the Terran Dominion. We seek peace, but we do not kneel. The stars belong to all who dare to reach them." The words echoed across the galaxy. Some species cheered, others panicked. But one thing was clear: the era of human silence was over. Over the next few years, trade ships began appearing between Dominion space and independent systems. The humans offered technology and aid in exchange for knowledge and raw materials. Their economy grew faster than anyone predicted. Even species loyal to the Council started trading with them in secret. The Dominion's influence spread quietly, not through war but through trust. The Council's pride couldn't handle it. They called emergency meetings, arguing over how to deal with the rising power. But deep down, they all knew there was nothing they could do. Humanity had achieved the impossible. They had been exiled, abandoned, forgotten. And they had returned not as victims, but as equals, maybe even as leaders. On the edge of Dominion space, one of their great fleets prepared for a new mission: exploration beyond the known galaxy. Their ships gleamed with light from engines that folded space like waves. As the fleet rose from orbit, millions watched the broadcast. No one spoke, but everyone knew what it meant. Humanity was not just surviving anymore. They were beginning a new chapter. The galaxy had underestimated them once. It wouldn't make that mistake again. The Dominion's rise didn't come with explosions or invasions. It came with quiet confidence, with the strength of people who had learned to build their future with their own hands. The Council had wanted to erase them. Instead, they had created their greatest rival, and perhaps their greatest teacher. The humans didn't seek revenge. They sought understanding. But they also carried a message in their hearts: that exile had made them stronger, that hardship had taught them unity, and that no power in the galaxy could ever again decide their fate. And so, as the stars shifted and the old empires began to fade, the galaxy finally realized what had been growing in the shadows all along. The exiled world called Earth had built not just a nation, but a legacy. The Terran Dominion had arrived. The stars shimmered like cold dust when the Dominion fleet began its slow journey toward the central worlds. For decades, the humans had stayed in their own territory, never crossing into Council space. They had no reason to. But now, that was about to change. It started with a simple message. It wasn't loud, it wasn't threatening. It was just a notice sent across all frequencies. Human delegation en route to Council territory, requesting passage for diplomatic meeting. Those few words caused chaos in every corner of the galaxy. No one could believe it. The Terran Dominion was actually returning, not as refugees but as an equal power. The same humans who had once been thrown out of the galactic community were now arriving in ships that could eclipse entire cities. The Council had no choice but to respond. Their members argued for hours. Some said the humans shouldn't be allowed in. Others warned that refusing could mean war. In the end, fear won over pride. Permission was granted, but inside the Council was uneasy. No one knew what to expect. When the first Dominion ships appeared on the edge of the Council's home system, the sensors almost malfunctioned. The readings didn't make sense. Each vessel carried energy levels beyond the Council's largest battleships. They weren't painted in the dull metal tones of old human designs. They were sleek, black and silver, moving with quiet grace. They didn't need to show power. Their presence alone was enough. The humans didn't send warships alone. Among their fleet were massive carriers filled with diplomats, scientists, and peace officers. Every move was calm, professional, and disciplined. It was clear they hadn't come to fight. They had come to show what humanity had become. When the ships entered orbit, people from across the galaxy gathered to watch. On public screens, news networks broadcast the arrival live. Billions tuned in, holding their breath. They expected anger, pride, or arrogance from the humans. Instead, they saw something completely different. The main human representative stepped forward, standing before the Council's grand chamber. The hall, made of shining glass and crystal, had once seemed enormous. But now, under the watchful eyes of the Dominion envoy, it felt small. The human spoke clearly, with a calm but powerful voice. "We have come not to seek forgiveness," they said, "and not to ask for entry. We have come to remind you that exile did not destroy us. It defined us." A silence spread across the chamber. The Council leaders sat still, unsure how to respond. The human continued, their words carrying the quiet strength of a people who had earned everything through struggle. "We built our home from dust and ruin. We survived what no one believed we could. While you debated, we worked. While you doubted, we built. Now we stand here, not as the lost children of the galaxy, but as its equals." The speech lasted only a few minutes, but it changed everything. Across the galaxy, millions of people felt a spark of respect for humanity. Even species who had never met humans before felt the power in those words. After the meeting, the Council members tried to act calm, but inside, they were shaken. The Dominion's technology, their organization, even their manner, it all showed a level of progress that the Council hadn't achieved in centuries. They couldn't understand how a once-exiled species had advanced so far. What they didn't realize was that exile had been humanity's greatest teacher. The loneliness of the dark had forced them to depend on each other. They had learned to innovate, to adapt, and to never wait for help. Every mistake, every loss had made them stronger. In the following weeks, the Dominion's presence became the most talked-about topic in the galaxy. Their ships remained in orbit, conducting peaceful visits and cultural exchanges. They showed medical technologies that could heal injuries the Council's doctors couldn't treat. They demonstrated clean energy systems that could power planets for centuries. And yet, despite their power, the humans were humble. They never bragged. They never threatened. Their actions spoke louder than any words. When one of the Council's transport fleets suffered a malfunction near a collapsing star, Dominion ships arrived instantly and rescued every crew member. They didn't ask for reward or thanks. They simply smiled and said, "No one gets left behind." That one act won more allies than any speech could. Slowly, the fear surrounding humanity began to fade. Even the Council's own citizens started questioning their leaders. "Why did we exile them?" they asked. "Why did we let pride blind us for so long?" Meanwhile, the Dominion's leader met privately with the Council's head representative. The conversation was simple but direct. "We don't seek war," the human said quietly. "But we won't allow the same mistakes to repeat. The galaxy must change, together." The Council representative nodded, realizing something important. The humans weren't there to destroy the old order. They were there to improve it. To rebuild the galaxy in a better image, one based on fairness and unity, not arrogance and control. Weeks passed, and the humans became a regular part of the galactic stage again. But behind their calm appearance, they were also watching carefully. They knew not everyone welcomed their return. Some powerful groups in the council feared losing their influence. They began spreading rumors, lies about human motives, claims that the Dominion planned to take over. The humans didn't respond to the rumors. They let their actions speak. When pirates attacked a trade convoy carrying council supplies, it was the Dominion fleet that responded first, protecting both sides and escorting the ships safely home. The message was clear. Humanity didn't care about politics. They cared about what was right. As time went on, more species began to visit human worlds. What they found amazed them. Instead of giant fortresses or oppressive cities, they saw thriving colonies where people lived side by side, humans, aliens, and artificial intelligences working together. Children from different species studied in the same schools. Farmers and engineers worked hand in hand. It wasn't a dream. It was real. For the first time in ages, the galaxy saw a working example of unity. Some council scientists who visited Dominion research stations returned home speechless. They said human technology wasn't built on greed or competition, but on shared progress. Every discovery was made available to all citizens, regardless of rank or origin. The humans had created a system where knowledge was a gift, not a weapon. Slowly, the council began to change. Inspired by the Dominion's model, smaller worlds demanded more equality, more freedom, more respect. What the council had ruled through fear, the Dominion had won through inspiration. But the humans never sought to overthrow the council. They believed true strength came not from control but from cooperation. And so they offered a proposal, a new alliance, one that would unite both sides under shared principles. The vote to accept the proposal was one of the most watched events in galactic history. Billions tuned in as representatives from both sides stood in the same chamber. Some council members resisted until the very end, afraid of losing power. But when the final vote was cast, the majority agreed. The new galactic accord was signed. For the first time in centuries, peace felt real. As the ceremony ended, the human envoy looked up at the galaxy's central star and whispered softly, "We are home." The return of humanity wasn't marked by revenge or domination. It was marked by peace, by wisdom, and by the quiet pride of a species that had learned the hardest lesson of all, that survival means nothing without compassion. In the months that followed, trade routes opened, scientific exchanges grew, and former enemies became partners. The Dominion's knowledge spread across the stars, uplifting worlds that had been ignored for generations. Everywhere they went, people remembered the story, the species that had been cast out, forgotten, and underestimated, only to return stronger and kinder than ever. Still, in the far corners of the galaxy, there were those who watched with uneasy eyes. Some feared that the humans were too perfect, too united, too powerful. But humanity didn't chase perfection. They just kept moving forward, step by step, building bridges where others had burned them. And as the new alliance began to take shape, one truth became undeniable. Exile hadn't destroyed them. It had reborn them. The galaxy had finally accepted what it once feared. Humanity was not the monster in the dark. Humanity was the light that had learned how to survive the dark. Their return was not an end. It was a beginning. The dawn of a new era where no species would stand alone again. As the Dominion fleet slowly left the Council's capital, engines lighting up the stars, countless eyes watched from the surface below. For the first time in ages, hope filled the galaxy. The humans were back, not to conquer, not to claim revenge, but to lead everyone toward something better. And from that moment, the galaxy would never be the same again. The stars were calm that night. The great ships of the Terran Dominion drifted silently over the blue curve of Earth, their hulls shining like quiet beacons. It had been years since the humans had returned to the galaxy, years since the Council had realized that exile had not destroyed them, but reborn them. Now something new was beginning. Something that would change the meaning of what it meant to be human, and perhaps what it meant to be alive. For the first time in centuries, Earth was at peace. Cities sparkled again, not because of luxury or wealth, but because of purpose. People no longer looked up at the stars with fear or bitterness. They looked with pride. Children studied history not as a list of wars and failures, but as lessons of endurance. Humanity had learned to build, to lead, to forgive, and to dream again. But far from Earth, at the edge of known space, something mysterious was happening. A signal had been detected, faint, rhythmic, and ancient. It came from beyond the maps of the galaxy, a region no one had ever explored. The Dominion's best minds studied it for months. It wasn't a distress call nor a natural phenomenon, it was something else. The message repeated in perfect intervals like a heartbeat. Some believed it was from an unknown civilization. Others thought it was a remnant from before the Council's time. Whatever it was, humanity decided to find out. The Council warned them not to go. The region was dangerous, uncharted, full of energy storms and gravitational rifts. But humanity had never been the kind to turn away from mystery. They had faced worse and curiosity was part of who they were. So the Dominion launched an expedition, a fleet not for war, but for discovery. Scientists, explorers, engineers, and historians joined together under one goal: to uncover the truth behind the ancient signal. They called the mission Project Horizon. For months, the ships traveled through empty space farther than any known map had ever reached. They passed through dark nebulae, across dying stars, and near ancient ruins of civilizations long forgotten. Every discovery filled them with awe, but the signal kept calling, pulling them onward. Then, after nearly a year of travel, they reached the source. Floating in the void was a massive structure, older than any record in the galaxy. It was made of metal and stone fused together, its design both familiar and alien. Energy pulsed through it like veins carrying light. The signal came from within. When the first team entered, they found walls covered in strange carvings, not of species or languages, but of patterns, stars, and shapes that looked like galaxies themselves. And then, at the heart of the structure, they found something impossible. It was a chamber filled with light, soft, golden, almost alive. As the humans approached, the light responded, shifting, pulsing gently. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't a weapon. It felt aware. The scientists began recording, analyzing, but nothing in their instruments could explain it. The energy signature didn't match any known technology. Some believed it was an archive, a memory left behind by a civilization older than time. Others whispered that it might be the origin of the galactic network itself, the force that once guided life to the stars. Then, when one of the humans reached out, the light expanded, and the entire chamber filled with images. Not words, not sound and memories. The humans saw flashes of worlds forming, stars being born, oceans rising on barren planets. They saw civilizations rising and falling long before the Council had existed. And then they saw something that made their hearts stop. They saw Earth. Not the Earth they knew, but an image of it from thousands of years before humanity had ever built a ship. The planet glowed blue and green, surrounded by a halo of golden light, the same light that now surrounded them. And within that light they saw figures, not human, not alien, but beings of energy, shaping the planet's surface, nurturing it. The truth became clear. Earth wasn't just another random world. It had been chosen long ago as something special, a seed for life designed to endure where others would fall. The light had been part of that plan, a living legacy of a civilization that had vanished eons before the galaxy even had a council. The humans didn't know whether to feel proud or terrified. But one thing became clear: their rise, their strength, their endless will to survive. It wasn't an accident. Humanity had been meant to stand the test of time. When they returned to the Dominion, the discovery caused both wonder and disbelief. The Council demanded to see the evidence, so humanity invited them. Representatives from every major species traveled to the site. And when they entered that glowing chamber, they saw the same vision. The silence that followed was heavy. For centuries, the Council had seen humans as outsiders, a mistake, a danger. Now they saw that humanity was connected to the galaxy's oldest mystery, perhaps even to its creation. One of the alien scholars whispered, almost trembling, "They were never just another species. They were the legacy itself." The news spread fast. Across the stars, worlds reacted with shock and awe. Some feared what this meant. Others celebrated it. But the humans didn't boast or demand anything. They simply said, "We were chosen to protect what you left behind." From that moment, the Dominion took on a new purpose. They didn't see themselves as rulers or conquerors. They became guardians of knowledge, of life, and of the fragile peace that now bound the galaxy together. They began building new outposts, not for war, but for unity. They shared the technology that once saved them, teaching others how to survive without destroying their worlds. They opened schools where alien and human children studied side by side. They helped dying planets heal their ecosystems and rebuilt forgotten colonies into places of hope. The galaxy changed, slowly but surely. Even the Council itself transformed. The old arrogance faded. The species that once ruled by fear began to learn from the humans, not their weapons, but their resilience, their empathy, their courage. It was as if the exile had come full circle. The species once cast out had now become the heart of the galaxy's rebirth. Years later, a grand monument was built on Earth, not of stone or steel, but of living light. Using the same energy found in the ancient structure, it shimmered at night, glowing softly like a star that had chosen to rest on the surface of the world. Visitors came from every corner of the galaxy to see it. Some came to pay respect. Others came to remember the story, how one small planet, abandoned and underestimated, had risen to lead the stars. At the monument's base was a simple inscription, written in hundreds of languages. "From exile we learned strength. From strength we learned peace. From peace we became one." Every child on Earth learned those words. Every visitor carried them home. Humanity had changed the galaxy, not by conquering it, but by showing what it meant to endure, forgive, and keep hope alive even when the universe turned its back. And yet, the humans never forgot where they came from. They remembered the hunger, the darkness, the loneliness of exile. They remembered the hands that built ships from scrap, the minds that dreamed of stars even when the sky was full of storms. They never saw themselves as gods or chosen ones or saviors. They saw themselves as keepers, protectors of the fragile spark of life that connected every species, every world, every heart. Generations later, as new fleets departed to explore deeper regions of the universe, young explorers would look back at Earth glowing softly behind them and smile. They knew their ancestors had turned exile into purpose and purpose into peace. The galaxy no longer feared them. It followed them. Because humanity had taught everyone the most powerful truth of all, that no matter how many times you're cast out, you can always rise again, and sometimes the ones the universe pushes away are the ones it needs the most.